All right, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about the Flask API that you'll be building and show you the examples that are part of the template repository. So we're going to start in the API folder. This is where the Flask stuff is. Couple of things you'll need to make sure in case you took a pause between some of the last videos or rebooted your laptop or something. To sort of follow along with this video, you'll need to make sure that your containers are running. So you can either go back to Docker desktop, and if they're all grayed out, that means they're not running, and you could click, there should be a play button next to the stack. That would start them all up. Or you can, from the, let's say, I don't know, command line, just do docker compose up-d again. Okay, so in terms of the backend API, remember what we're attempting to achieve is connecting URL routes, so something that's like /products or /customers to particular Python functions and associating some HTTP verb with that connection. Now, the Flask application itself is going to be connecting to the MySQL the MySQL database in the back end. That is where it will get its data to sort of send back to the front end. So in some sense, it's like this is the kind of the middleman. The Flask API is kind of the middleman. So we're going to start just kind of exploring the code base. We've already talked about the envs and Dockerfile and requirements. And so what I want to do first is open this backend app file. So this is the kind of entry point for the application, the REST API application that's running in that particular container. There's not very much in it, but this is where it starts. The thing I want to point out is that we're running in debug mode, which means more information will be sent to the logs that you can see in Docker desktop, and it's running on port 4000, which is also what the port we're exposing from the API container right here. Okay. Actually, this port 4000 is related to the second number here. This 4000 is the local machine, like your laptop. Okay, so all we're doing is we're connecting, or we're importing this create app function that I've provided inside the REST entry point file inside the backend folder. So we're just going to take a look at that. And then once we have imported it, then we go ahead and run it. So the Flask, so this object you'll see, or what it returns is actually a Flask object. Okay, so here's the REST entry point. We set up some basic logging infrastructure. Of course, we're going to need Flask. We're also going to need to be able to connect to the database. So inside the DB connections folder, there's a very, very simple dunder init file that creates a MySQL object and returns it. And the MySQL object comes from the Flask extension MySQL library. And what we're doing with this parameter is we're saying that we want the things related to cursors, which I'll talk about in a second, to be kind of related to Python dictionaries rather than some other data format. Okay, so I'll talk about the blueprints in a second. The OS library, what we're using that for is to be able to handle anything dealing with paths and whatnot. And then you'll see it actually right here. Okay. So we're using it actually to get the environment variables also. And then the .env library is used to essentially take whatever we put inside this .env file and load it so that it can ultimately be accessed here. I won't go into the details of that, but it gives you a general idea. Okay, so here's the create app function I was referring to earlier. As I said, we create a Flask application, we load the env file, and then we're setting up some information to be able to connect to the database. So we're setting up the username, the password, the host, the port that we're going to be connecting to, and then the database name. Now, in our situation, we're going to be using Northwind as an example. It's running on port 3306. Now, This is 3306 because that's the internal container port. It's not 3200 because remember we mapped our laptop port 3200 to 3306 inside the container. So it grabs this information and uses it to ultimately construct and configure the Flask application object. As long as everything you put inside here, you don't mess with anything besides the password, this should all stay the same and work just fine. All right, so once we've set up that, then we're going to initialize the database the database object, which we're getting from up here. And then we are, I'm creating some incredibly simple routes. So remember that the base URL that you're going to go to in your application, just to connect to the REST API, not to the not to Streamlit, is going to be localhost : let me show you, localhost : 4000. Okay. Now normally you wouldn't connect directly to the REST API, you would do it through Streamlit, but just so we can do it one step at a time, I want to show you that you can connect to it. Okay. And so I've set up a couple of routes. So to the application object, so the Flask application object, I'm adding a route for the base route. So just, localhost : this would be 4000, but just / that's it. If I go to that URL in my browser, it's going to return this welcome to summer 2024 CS3200 template repo. So to sort of prove to you or show you what that means is I'm going to go to a browser and I'm going to go to localhost : 4000, just /. You don't actually need the /, but just to show you that's the relationship to the Python code. And you should see welcome to summer 2024 CS3200 project template repo. That's a mouthful. I'm also creating an application, a route for /data that simply is information about, the list of TAs and myself. So if I go back to the browser and I go to /data, same domain, then you can see this is the information I've entered in JSON format. Depending on, I don't know if I have a plugin to make it pretty print. It could potentially just be like all one line, kind of a bit messier looking. But in any event, you should be able to sort of recognize it's the same information. Okay, so that's the different information for the sample routes that I added. So I'm just going to compress that. Then I am creating this, I'm logging some information, which you can probably find this message inside the, logs in Docker Desktop. And then we're coming to these blueprints. Okay, so I want you to think of a blueprint as a collection of related routes in Flask. So you might organize your routes by the persona they go with. So you might, in this case, I have customers, in this example, I'm organizing them based on table, essentially. You can organize them based on table from your database, based on persona. There's a few different organizations. What I don't want you to do is to have just one big API folder that has, API file that has all of the routes in it at one time. So you'll notice that at the top of the file, I'm importing customers, this object, from backend customers customer route. So backend customers customer route. So this file right here, notice I'm creating a blueprint object. The name of it is customers. And then when I'm creating each individual route, rather than saying at app, I'm saying at customers. So I'm using the name of the blueprint object. Okay. So let's just take this one, for example, right here. So this is getting all of the information for the customers, right? Now, you could imagine that you might have another collection of routes. Maybe it's not customers, maybe it's invoices. But inside that set of routes, there might be a /customers, I don't know, to get the list of all customers that have placed orders or have open invoices or something like that. So if we had two blueprints that had the same resource, we would get some sort of collision in naming, because the computer, if we went to /customers, the computer wouldn't be able to figure out which function we wanted to execute. All right. So in the entry point, let's go back down to the bottom. So here I'm taking that customer's blueprint and I'm registering it with the application object, but I'm also providing this URL prefix. So this is basically saying when I would go to a particular resource or access a particular resource from the customer's route, rather than going localhost :4000/customers, I'm going to do localhost :4000/c/c/customers. So to access any of the routes inside the customer's blueprint, I would need to prepend it with /c. So let's just check that out. So I'm going to come to, so I want to go to customers. Oh wait, that's a put. Oh, here's the get. So customers get. All right. So we'll go back to our browser and we'll get rid of the /data and we'll do /c/customers. And so this is all the information. So this is coming from the database. Flask is packaging it up as JSON and it's sending it back to the front end. Now you'll notice the information here is a little wonky. I'll get to that in a second. But the important thing here is that we're getting information back from the front end. I'm sorry, from the database. Okay, so let's see. So in REST entry point, so I'm doing the same for products, but I'm prepending. I'm using the prefix /p. Okay. So let's take a look at the Docker logs for the web API container. And you'll notice there's information about things I'm getting. Here's some debugging statements. So this is, again, where things end up that are being logged. Okay. Yeah, so I am going to stop this video here, and then we'll look at adding a route in the next video.